Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to the session. This is a session on how to develop shared improvement approaches across local systems. My name is Jen Morgan and I'm Q's local system lead, and I'll be guiding this session over the next 60 minutes. But before we begin, I just wanted to say that live captions are available for the session, and Andrew, who's our captioner, will be, you can find him through the stream text link. Posted in the chat if you need that, so he'll be there to help you out for live captions. And yeah, for those of you who joined, the main purpose of the session is to really take some time to reflect on the value of taking a shared improvement approach to provide you, and also to provide you with a framework that might help you in your own work, especially for those who are leading improvement across local places and local systems. So to offer you insight and inspiration, I'd like to delighted to introduce you to three contributors. Firstly, we have Penny Piera, Managing Director of Q. And then we're also joined by two Q members, Jane Lovett, who's the Associate Director for Multi-Professional Improvement and Engagement at Surrey Heartlands. And then we also have Dr. Michelle Webster, Associate Director of Quality Improvement and Clinical Innovation over at Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership NHS Trust. So welcome to the speakers, and we're delighted you're offering your contribution today. So the way the session will work, it's in three parts. Firstly, Penny will share our recently published Principles for Shared Improvement Approaches, which is a synthesis of dozens of interviews and engagements we had with ICS leaders over the last year. And through these principles, she'll also share a little bit more about our new upcoming partnership with NHS Confederation. Then we'll hear a bit more from Jane and Michelle, who will share more about their own work and also how they're applying shared improvement approaches in their local context. They will also have a short interactive dialogue session to explain some of the questions and challenges they have as peers working in this space to navigate the challenges. So we'll be doing some peer reflection there. And then at the end, we'll have some time for you to consider what these shared principles mean for you, how you might apply them, some questions you might have in your own space, as well as any additional questions you might have as speakers. So as we go along, feel free to pose your reflections or any questions you have in the chat box. We're really keen to build the intelligence of these shared principles as we develop the local system work. So continuous contribution to that will be really grateful. So without further ado, Penny, I'll hand over to you to share the principles to kick us off.
Thank you very much. It's a real privilege to be here. What fantastic other contributors. Yeah, so as Jen says, it's my job to introduce 5 principles that we've developed to set up a discussion about developing improvement approaches that give us a shared platform for change when working across organisational boundaries. This is the first piece of work that we've done as part of a new partnership between Q, the Health Foundation, and NHS Confederation. We're feeling really excited about that. We'll be supporting learning and improvement across local systems. So I'm going to share a little on that at the end. What we're hoping is that these principles might guide you in your work and also be something that you might point to when this type of work is taking place in your organisation or local place. Why did we focus on this? Well, we've been hearing that as we get more into doing work in systems, people are realising that there are often many improvement methods used by different organisations within a patch. So that's been prompting people to think about how they might increase consistency and have a clearer shared language and set of principles for cross-system improvement work. NHS Impact, encouraging all systems as well as providers to develop an improvement approach, is set to bring all this up the agenda in England. This work isn't necessarily straightforward or without elephant traps, so we wanted to help pool emerging experience on how to do this well, because how we work together on this is part of the change process will make a big difference to what we're then able to achieve. It feels like there's a great opportunity for us as a community to help in this space. When I think about how I see members come together through Q with different ideas and expertise, infused with a kind of commitment to joining things up to have greater impact, I guess I see some magic happen. Given that magic spark is needed to unlock the potential of system working in health and care. So it's more than structural change and actually shifts care and culture. It feels like we've got responsibility to connect the energy and experience in Q to the work that's happening across local places and systems. As we do in Q, we got people together to develop what I'm going to share. We worked mainly with people who have a formal role in developing improvement across organisations or systems, weaving in what we've been learning over the years through the Q community. I really hope the principles resonate. We're all busy, so we set ourselves the challenging task of distilling all of the complexity of working across different organisations into 5 concise principles. I'm going to canter through them in turn, and I hope it's going to inspire you to read the slightly fuller version on our website, and we've copied that in the chat. These principles might apply when you're talking about your improvement approach overall where you work, or when you're designing the approach you use on a particular project that spans organisations. We heard lots of different reasons people might want to develop a shared improvement approach. Perhaps there's a need for a common language for organisations new to improvement, or to make it easier for people to work together when working on programmes of work that span different boundaries. In good improvement fashion, you need to develop a shared view for what you're trying to achieve with all the people who are going to need to then engage. You might have a big vision for a world where we all work together with the one true method that so motivates you and your organisation. But do your neighbours see it the same way? Especially when the system is under such great operational and workforce challenges. Think about what the priorities are that will make the biggest difference to improving health outcomes and experience for patients and the population. So that's our first principle. Secondly, once you have people in the room, where's your attention? Is it on the detail of the content of the approaches that you're working through? Or is it also on the dynamics between people and the relationships that are forming? The process of, say, working out the improvement approach you're going to use to address end-of-life care, for example, across your patch, that is the work. Doing this well will influence whether the approaches you use are actually accepted and work in practice, and in turn, how much you're able to achieve for patients together. So we heard that we should think about who's in the room and the share of voice. We need to make connections with those outside the NHS and those who have less engagement and support and improvement. We often need to bring people from all parts of the voluntary and community sector, local authority sector to achieve change. Yet these wider groups can often be alienated by the improvement discussions we have in the NHS. So think about how you'll have an inclusive, non-jargony approach to this. You might find you make more progress by finding opportunities to collaborate on specific issues with people from different organisations and sectors, rather than seeking to engage people in a more abstract discussion about improvement approaches. One of the biggest risks I think we see in developing more shared improvement approaches is that people get seduced by the apparent simplicity and appeal of everyone using one method. While this may work and add value within an organisation, I tend to find that in practice there's a mix of different methods that are being used, all the more so when it comes to doing work that spans systems. After all, different methods bring different strengths. NHS Impact is useful in setting an expectations all providers and systems in England will have an improvement approach aligned with 5 key principles, but concluded that we shouldn't try to impose a single method. I guess what we heard was that we should take the time to really understand and respect the different starting points and improvement capability in the system. If organisations in your local place or system have established their own methods, see this experience as an asset rather than a problem. There's often a lot of cultural and practical history to what's used in different organisations that you can't just ignore. Rather than expecting people to use the same method, those we spoke to felt it was often more useful to focus on the core ideas that are shared between different methods, and ultimately focus on the problems you're working on rather than the method being in the foreground. This will help make system-wide improvement work more accessible, inclusive, practical, and productive. Our fourth principle recognises that the idea of shared improvement methods won't translate into much unless there's some collective ownership and leadership that forms around it. This is not about one organisation or team doing this. There are improvement leaders at every level of the system, so identify the different roles needed to develop and make a success of a shared improvement approach, and who is most suitable to lead each part. There will likely be things that need to be led at system level, for example, perhaps breaking down silos, framing a shared problem. But there's a lot of advantages to increasing inclusivity by engaging across sectors and partners. Much of the improvement expertise often sits in local organisations and indeed in the Q community. So we've been encouraging formal leaders in integrated care boards or equivalent structures outside of England to kind of enable others within their local area to lead parts of this. So if there's a capability building strand to this, who are the people who already have capacity to build skills that could be given resources to expand what they're doing? The final principle, in a way, underpins all the others. While I hope that these principles do a kind of decent job at distilling the wisdom of those doing the work of complex system change into some key pointers, this is messy, it's imperfect work. There's no blueprint for improvement strategies and approaches that span large systems. So approach this with the mindset that you'll need to learn and adjust as you go. This can also help set a more inclusive, liberating approach to this. This is going to take time and need to adapt as the context changes. There'll be pitfalls and tensions along the way, so it feels important to foster an environment where people aren't afraid to fail and indeed they learn from what doesn't work as much as what does. Developing a shared improvement approach is going to be a cultural as much as a technical shift. The work of improvement is hard work, and so it also needs to be fun work that gets people gives people energy from doing things together. I hope you found those principles useful. Ultimately, system working has to be the future if we're to meet the needs of the populations we serve. This is the leading edge of change, and so it's a particularly important area for us to learn together in terms of how to go about it. I'm hoping, these principles has given you a few fresh angles on working to develop the approaches you need with others that you're working with. I hope it's also given you a moment to reflect on how critical the expertise in the Q community is to the work that's happening to develop effective local systems in the UK. I do hope you'll get inspired, perhaps get involved in work that we'll be doing in partnership with NHS Confederation. We've got the opportunity to reach the boards in integrated care boards and integrated care partnerships across England, and indeed this is going to involve health boards and others elsewhere in the UK. The people who are tasked with the big system goals to improve health and care are going to need all of the improvement and collaboration ideas and energy that the Q community can bring to it. People who join Q are often here because you can see the need and the opportunity to work across boundaries. So I'm hoping we can draw on your energy, your expertise to help create local systems that are really thriving as effective improvement and learning systems. Places that create a more supportive environment within which your work can thrive and scale. We're going to be launching in earnest in November, so watch this space for more on what we'll be doing. I'm going to hand back now to Jen to hand over to the other speakers. Thanks.
Great, thanks Penny for sharing those principles and the process as well. So we're going to start with you, Michelle. Michelle, just a chance to share a little bit more about yourself and your role and your work. As well as responding. I know you're early out on your journey and you had some really great thoughts just to respond on what's coming up for you as you start on your journey, so you'll have a chance to share that and to respond to the principles as well. So over to you.
Thank you, and nice to be here, and it's a real privilege actually for me because I've only been in my role for around about 12 months, so quite a new member of the Q community. But just to introduce myself, so my name is Michelle Webster and I work at Coventry in Warwickshire Partnership Trust, and we're a mental health trust predominantly. Also have learning disabilities and autism services, and also community physical health services, and spanning quite a wide geographical area across Coventry and Warwickshire. And I'm the Associate Director of Quality Improvement and Clinical Innovation, and I've got quite a big role. I'm also the Chief Clinical Information Officer, so I lead on our digital transformation, so a lot of improvement work as well within the digital remit. But my background is a clinical psychologist, so worked for over 20 years in the trust as a psychologist, but always kind of came at my work from an improvement perspective, and always really interested in kind of system improvement as well, and how we can work across teams and across organisations, so across those kind of organisational boundaries, thinking about improvement methodology and how we can use that. So this was the perfect opportunity for me. The job came about 12 months ago to move into the Associate Director of Quality Improvement role, and I kind of jumped at it when it came out for advert, and was lucky enough to be appointed, and it's around about a year since now, so it was last October. But when I came into my role, what I noticed about 12 months ago was that we were delivering as an organisation loads and loads of QI training. So we use QSAR methodology, and we had a lot of staff attending and really interested, but what I did find is that I think staff weren't always utilising their skills, and some of the learning they had didn't always then translate into delivering quality improvement projects or QI activity. And also a lot of the work that we were doing was quite internally focused, or was all internally focused, so very much about delivering QSAR training to our own staff, and very little opportunity really to be thinking about how we share and learn some of the lessons that we will learn through our improvement work across with our system partners as well. So initially we started on a bit of a journey to rewrite our strategy. That was the key thing I wanted to do, was to really kind of set a new agenda for improvement work at my organisation. And we started on a journey of engaging with staff. So that was really interesting, listening to the presentations earlier, because a lot of our strategy development was all about what's really important to staff in our organisation in terms of moving our improvement work to moving it forward. And we developed a new vision, mission, and a core set of values for our improvement work. Crucially, our vision now is to influence cultural change by inspiring. Got a bit of a hashtag, a movement for improvement, which we quite like, which sparks curiosity, which is one of our values, encourages creativity. Another of our values builds courage. Our third value, to learn and share ideas together. And it's the sharing ideas together really that kind of want to talk a little bit about today really. Because for us it was important that within our mission, which obviously what we want to do is to teach, coach and promote improvement methodology, but we want everybody to be able to continuously improve together, and that's within our organisation, but also across organisational boundaries, and really start to think about how we can share our improvement journey as an organisation. So one of our key strategic objectives was to develop a shared understanding and a collaborative approach to all improvement activities, and to ensure we have a central principle of collaboration and co-production in everything that we're doing. And we recognise that to achieve this, we then need to reach out to our system partners, which we also recognise isn't easy. Everybody's really busy, everybody's got their own priorities and their own demands, and a lot of their own system pressures as well. So trying to make some of those relationships is quite difficult. The organisation I work in, we've got about 4,600 staff, but our big acute hospital, University Hospital Corrington Warwickshire, is a massive organisation, and they have been one of the organisations, or the 5 organisations doing the Virginia Mason Institute programme. So a lot of work's happened there in terms of developing their improvement approaches. Then we've got 2 other acute hospitals in South Warwickshire and North Warwickshire, who again share some of our methodology around QSAR methodology, but really trying to reach out, find out who do we need to speak to, how do we get people all around a table to talk about these things. It's not easy. This kind of image I had about let's all work together as a system actually probably wasn't as straightforward as I hoped it would be, but for me it was that kind of taking that first step, and it's going back to some of those key principles. So the first thing really, and the thing that kind of Penny was just talking about for me, which I think is really important, is about that investing time and energy in developing relationships and building connections. So for me that's been really central, and that's where we're at the minute. So we're very early in our journey, but for me, I think it's really important to get to know people, understand their reasons and motivations for why they do what they do. What gets them up in the morning? That was one of the first questions we asked today. What brings you here today? What gets you up? What motivates you? And for me, and I am a psychologist, so relationships are really key. But for me, it's building that relationship and building that trust. For me, is where you really need to start, and that's where we're at now. And then the second principle, which I also think is key in the early stages, is to really define the scope and goals together. So again, that's one of the principles that Penny was talking about. And it's to have that kind of common purpose and language. And thinking about shared purpose, it brings me back to a TED talk I watched years ago. And I know there's a few of my team on this call, and I go on about Simon Sinek all the time, but there's a really key TED talk he gave where it talked about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And for me, understanding the why is really critical. And having that shared purpose is key, especially as we work as a system. Because like Penny talked about, there might be different whats, so we might be doing slightly different things. How we do it might be different as well. So we might be using different improvement methodologies. But for me, it's that why, why are we all working in improvement, in the field of improvement? What are those shared problems, and why are we here? So for me, it's that, understanding that shared purpose and having that same improvement mindset. Because for me, it is about that we're all here to deliver safe care. We're all here to deliver quality of care, effective care, cost-efficient care, and the best possible experience for our patients, communities, and our staff. So ultimately, that's where I want to start, although that's where we are starting in Coventry and Warwickshire. It's really to start thinking about having that shared vision for improvement. So even if we are using different methodologies at the minute, because we are, and maybe we've got a shared common language about improvement, but there's differences in language as well. The Virginia Mason language is quite different to what we're using in our improvement work within our own organisation. But for me, it's just ensuring that we are all kind of working together and we're all there looking at the same, we've all got the same shared purpose. But it's really early days for us, but I think, as an organisation from our side and our system parts, well, we seem to be all really passionate and committed to taking this, to kind of going on this journey together. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Jane because I'm really keen to see how it's been working in her organisation and within her system, because I think you're a bit further on, Jane, in your journey. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Jane. I work in the Surrey Heartlands, work across the whole integrated care system. So I'm employed by the Integrated Care Board, but work across the system. A little bit about me, I'm a physio originally, and so have been doing improvement from that perspective, actually as a clinician, and then within leading services and improving the way that we worked clinically. I kind of moved into the field of quality within clinical commissioning groups, back in the day. And similar to Michelle, I've been in my role maybe a little bit longer, about 1.5 years in this leading improvement as well as multi-professional leadership across our integrated care system. And I've had my team around me, and we've got a small team focused on some different areas, but one of them is quality improvement across the system. We've been a team for a bit under a year, so it still feels early, but appreciating perhaps a bit further along the journey than Michelle. Relatively new to Q, had some opportunities to spend some time with Penny, which has been great. And so this is my first Q community event. So also really pleased to be able to come and chat about what we've been doing, and hopefully it's helpful to some others. So as I say, the entire focus of my team, what we're trying to do in the improvement space, is actually developing system-wide improvement approaches. So this is so relevant to my role and what we're trying to achieve here in our system. And a bit of history about Surrey Heartlands is that we had a Surrey Heartlands Academy. We've had that in place for a number of years, pre-pandemic and before I was in this role. And it had a quality improvement pillar within that academy, which was looking at quality improvement across our system. We were also an early integrated care system when there was, the early adopters and the STPs and things. So we've been working in an anomaly integrated way for a long time here in Surrey Heartlands. But I think that the big change last year when we became a formal integrated care system has felt different, actually, surprisingly felt different, to put us on a real statutory footing to work in this integrated way. Our Surrey Heartlands Academy and the improvement pillar paused a bit during the pandemic, as some of these things tended to do, and that's what brought me into it now last year, where we're reinvigorating our kind of system approach. And the reason for kind of talking about that history is pre-pandemic, back in the previous academy days, there had already been conversations in our system about methodology, QI methodology. We used to have one trust who's partnered with Virginia Mason, and we had an IHI diagnostic come to our system, and it was discussed, should we all get the similar approach? And quite early on, it was decided that no, that isn't something that we wanted to do here in Surrey Heartlands. So having that conversation been running for many years, let's say 5 years, perhaps even more, what I can reflect on, particularly hearing Penny talk about diversity as an asset, that conversation still comes up, and we still need to remind ourselves that what we are not talking about here is a single methodology across our system. And what we often find in our system is that the people who are quite involved in the improvement space really understand that, we're all bought into the fact that the different methods and different things have benefits and offers to come together. But as a system, we want to keep that diversity and pool our shared knowledge to really get better outcomes. But when we get people in our conversations that are less well known with improvement science and improvement generally, they'll go to thinking, oh, we're talking about one methodology, great, we'll all do the same methods. So it's a rhetoric that we continually repeat and continually have to describe that that's not what we're trying to do here in Surrey Heartlands. We set up a quality improvement collaborative that we've had going for a little while now, and that is it brings our partners together across the system to try and develop this system-wide approach, actually. And similar to how Michelle described, we kind of thought that, great, we'll just get all our partners in the room and we'll all just talk about how we do it, and it's going to be great. We're just going to get on and kind of work together in this improvement space. And funnily enough, it really wasn't quite as simple as that. And hearing now these principles that have come through, it's really resonating with me. So if I pick out another one, Michelle talked about this one as well, around defining the scope and the goals together. We probably didn't spend enough time at the beginning about, well, why are we coming together in a quality improvement collaborative? Why do we need a shared improvement approach? And actually we're going back and revisiting that together now, because we kind of, really interesting, Penny, hearing you talk about, we've been kind of quite focusing on that theoretical element. So what we are doing is designing a quality improvement framework across our system, and that is absolutely to try and describe our shared approach and how we want to work together. But I think probably what we want to be doing is spending a bit more time on why we're coming together, again, going to Michelle's. And I think grounding it in the real work and grounding in the real word is something that we need to focus a bit more on, because reflecting myself and hearing more today from Penny, I think that is going to really help us to turn it into reality rather than just conceptually talk about it. I think the other thing that we find in our quality improvement collaborative, and in fact in most spaces that we work in the system, is we're very NHS heavy. And it's one thing for us to stand up and say, absolutely, we want to work with all our partners and have everyone involved. And this is not just the NHS, we have to work with our social care and our voluntary sector, but actually we have to work really, really hard to think about that. And some of the things that we are doing to try and improve that, when we run offers, for example, we have maybe a learning offer or our collaborative group or some other groups that we hold, we're really looking at the stakeholders and saying, right, we have to kind of actively ring fence the spaces and make sure it's not 25 NHS people and one voluntary sector, because that's our kind of fallback. That's where we end up, and we have to work really hard at that, and we have to work hard at that every week and every day. And not only that, but what we've learned is that we have to work really hard to make sure that when we bring our partners into the room, we're being inclusive in the way that we talk, in the way that we refer to methodologies and approaches, and in fact, even quality improvement. So we were having a conversation around some partner organisations about what quality improvement means to them and what it looks like in their organisation. And actually, even people's understanding about what we were talking about when we said quality improvement, there was a lot of conversation about kind of sharing of learning, a lot about kind of quality assurance and quality, sort of more other areas of the quality management system. But it's something that we recognise we need to actually make sure that we all understand what we're talking about. We're all talking about the same thing and not reverting to our quite NHS heavy language around quality improvement. So that is a focus for us. We've got a system-wide quality improvement conference coming up this month, which we're really excited about. It's our first system-wide quality improvement conference titled Strengthening Connections to Embrace Change, which we just think is fantastic. And similar to what I've just described before, we really actively tried to reach out to our non-NHS partners so that we have a really broad representation, and we didn't fall into the kind of historic way where we have a lot of heavy NHS attendees. It got sold out really quickly. The enthusiasm for our conference is off the chart, so we're really excited about that. And we're going to work really hard in building those relationships and making those connections, so they're kind of building the relationships and trust. With our programme of work, we focus a lot on, like I described earlier, how we can be inclusive and how we can make sure everyone's voice in the room gets heard, and that's something we'll be taking into this conference. So we also have in Surrey Heartlands an improvers network set up, which is our more informal space, and that again, it's been really helpful for building relationships and trust. It's open to anybody, anyone who has an interest in improvement across our entire system. And we come together, we share learning, we do kind of peer support, peer coaching, problem solving together, opportunities to focus on particular topics. So for example, this month we were looking at co-production. So it's been a really good forum for building those relationships and bringing people together without that kind of hierarchical structure. As per kind of what I've just been, the rhetoric I'm saying here is we really work hard to try and broaden the engagement. That's something we continually need to do for this type of forum, to make sure that we've got the kind of diversity. I think just in my last minute or two, I'm just going to talk about another one that I found really interesting in the conversation this morning was around using an improvement mindset. So one of the sayings we often say in our little team is we're trying to do this, and sometimes it feels like we're just kind of wading through treacle, like, why are we coming together again? Why do we need to do this? And one of our sayings is, come on guys, you know, we just need to get to the top of the mountain and pop on the skis and slide down and see where it takes us. And that's our kind of improvement mindset. There is no way of doing this. There's not a blueprint written out that says, right, do this and get these people in a room and use this agenda. We have to figure it out as we go, and we've got to be brave about that. And we're quite open with the people around us, with our improvement colleagues, that we're not sure if this is going to work. We're not sure if this is going to be the right thing, but we need to give it a go. And we've definitely got a lot of willingness in our system to come together. I think what we're really looking forward to kind of moving forward is how we can turn the willingness and the collaborative approach we've got into some of the real life collaborative projects. So that's kind of our next key step, is how to turn this into actually moving forward and delivering some joint work together across our system. So I think I'll pause there because I think time is ticking away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Michelle, for sharing your really rich and insightful reflections on your journey so far. So thank you both. And in the spirit of curiosity, in the spirit of relationships, in the spirit of building intelligence together, we thought we'd give you a few minutes just to do a little bit of dialoguing with each other, just to explore in both. You haven't heard each other share this before, so just what came up for you in each other's presentation. What are you connecting with? What do you disagree with? I've got about maybe 8 minutes for this, just for you to build some intelligence together.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really interesting to see kind of the journey that you've been on as an organisation, because we are in really in our early days, and it's great seeing the chat as well and some of the feedback in the chat, because I've been struggling a little bit, like I said in my kind of brief talk earlier, to kind of know who to reach out to, and I've just one of my colleagues in South Warwickshire, Emma, nice to see you, has reached out in the chat here, and I think this is what it's all about, and especially the Q community is all about this as well, isn't it? But I think for me that's some of the difficulty somewhere is knowing kind of where to start, and when we're talking about that kind of kind of leadership as well, and the kind of leadership within improvement. I'm just wondering, Jen, have you found that there's been an organisation that's kind of led a bit more than another, or is it, have you all, because it's that kind of coming together initially, and I've been, because I'm really passionate about us coming together as a system, but I also don't want to kind of monopolise the kind of the journey that we're on moving forward. So I don't, has it been a bit like that? Has there been an organisation that's kind of taken a bit more of a lead than others, or have you kind of come together?
It's a great question, actually. I think probably reflecting on my system, it doesn't feel like we've had kind of one striving the lead. It's fairly balanced with the engagement that we've had. I mean, I would absolutely have loved it. We would have loved to have had one kind of chomping at the bit. Not that people haven't been willing. There's definitely been a willingness to come together. But I think where it's been then challenging to turn it into the reality and into the action is because everyone comes from their own organisation that has its own priorities. And they're competing priorities sometimes, right? So they're not always aligned to the same thing. And so people say, yeah, we want to come and have an improvement approach. We work together on something, but actually I'm really busy working on this. And that person's really busy working on that, and they're different. And so that's been a kind of a challenge of how we can turn it into, right, how can we come together and work on something together with those priorities? And I think on your point about the kind of who to reach out to and where to start, it's really interesting because, as I say, as a team, we spend a lot of time thinking about this, and you just think, I just don't even know. And what I've been personally amazed at is two things. One is, you know, how much when you go out and reach out to someone individually, personally, and say, look, I've got something. I don't really know if you're the right person or might be a good person, but could we have a chat about it? And people love to just hear and be curious and have a chat. And if they're not the right person, they're, oh, well, I'll put you onto this, or why don't you have a chat with that person? So the personal approach has been really beneficial. And also, sometimes I'll start that engagement thinking, oh, everyone's so busy, no one's going to want to come and, you know, come to another meeting or have discussion. And actually, people have loved it. Like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to come along. Yeah, I'd love to. Oh, can this person come along? So I think there's a lot more enthusiasm, even in the really pressured time that we're working in, to kind of come together and think about this.
Yeah, and I think what I found is we had an event locally. So, as I say, our kind of big acute hospital, UHCW, they've been one of the Virginia Mason sites, one of the first kind of 5 sites to roll out that, and they did an event a couple of weeks ago, and I imagine there's probably people on this meeting today who were there, because there was kind of a good about 150 people that came together in Coventry to hear Gary Kaplan from the Virginia Mason Institute speak. It's a really great event. But it was interesting actually, because when I was speaking to people there, you know, it's amazing how many people know each other but don't know each other. So I was kind of introducing myself, and people say, oh, so you're Michelle from CWPT, and I think sometimes it's like you say, kind of a little bit afraid sometimes to make those links with people, but actually people are really keen to get talking. And I mean, it was handy because we were kind of all there. We were in a room and kind of over a sandwich and having a chat over lunch, and it's amazing actually some of the shared problems that we were talking about. So obviously we're in a mental health trust, but some of the challenges within mental health is the kind of the pathways that go across acute services, from the kind of people presenting at A&E through to our so through the kind of acute and mental health and community partners, and we had some shared problems there. So that's one opportunity that we've started to talk about that, and I think probably some of our initial conversations may be around that kind of shared problem that we've got together, but it's just finding that opportunity to, how do we get those conversations started? Because otherwise for me it's kind of fallen back onto the methodology issue that we use QSAR, which is the kind of HSE, which is now under AQUA. I've seen again a bit of a chat in the chat about that, but we use a specific type of methodology, but the tools are the same, and underneath that the tools are the same. And it was interesting to hear from Dr. Gary Kaplan, who's, you know, he founded the Virginia Mason Institute, and I think he said, and I don't want to quote him exactly, but he said something like, no one improvement methodology is superior to another, and actually we're all here for the same purpose, and it's all about, you know, very similar tools. We're using this, we're all using process mapping, and we're thinking about SPC charts, and we're using different similar tools, but sometimes it's just the language that's different in terms of some of the the language, but yeah, I can't remember how he quite said it, but it was the message I got was, you know, don't get hung up on which methodology it is. It's all about actually coming together, which I thought was an interesting takeaway for me, because it kind of opened up that opportunity for me to kind of reach out a bit more and think, just because you're using a different methodology, it doesn't mean to say you're not doing the same work as us and you're not coming with the same improvement mindset.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Actually, we've kind of another kind of thing that we say around a lot in our team is we don't want people coming together and wasting time talking about methodologies when we can be spending that time talking about the problem and working it out together. Yeah. And as I say, we've definitely got buy-in for that. And the other thing that came into my mind as you were talking about that, you know, approaching people when you're in that setting, for example, we've spent quite a lot of time in our team kind of working out our little elevator pitch, because the kind of work we're doing, it's a little bit intangible and it's a bit hard to describe because we're not within a kind of provider organization delivering frontline care. And we found that that's really helped us. Okay, if we can, you know, got that 90-second or 60-second kind of, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it, that we can get out really quickly when we meet new people in those environments. That's kind of really helped us to make those connections and try and bring people on board with us.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I mean, it's an interesting concept actually to do that in terms of an elevator pitch, because lots of times we get asked, so what's QI then? What is it that you do? And sometimes it's really difficult. And I know a lot of the work we do is around measurement, and it's about the measurement of benefits, the measurement of outcomes. But actually, sometimes it can be difficult to measure. It can be different, and the measurement of benefits may come a bit further down the line. So they're, you know, trying to demonstrate the value of our team and the value of working across the system can sometimes be really difficult. And getting people to come on our training as well, having that, you know, unless you come on the training, you really get an understanding about it, but having the opportunity just to be able to say, you know, what quality improvement means to them. And that was where our strategy started. And that's where our values came from about, you know, are you curious about, you know, things? Are you always asking questions? Are you curious things? Are you creative in the way that you think about things? And we really want to instill that courage to, you know, you got an idea or something doesn't feel a bit right, having that courage to change and being brave. So that's where we've tried to kind of instill this kind of, we call it a movement for improvement in our organisation now, that, you know, we recognise this isn't something that's going to happen overnight, but we're going in the right direction now, and we're trying to get that kind of improvement mindset instilled within people in the organisation, which this is what I want to now look at, how we kind of start to work then with system partners to think about how we can do that. And I really liked your academy idea in that sense then, about bringing people together in a kind of slightly more formalised way, but again with that same mindset.
And I love movement for improvement. Being a physio, that's right up my alley as well. And can I ask a question? I'll check I'm going okay for time.
Yeah, around, just 1 more minute. That's great.
Right. Around the kind of strategy you described and the values underpinning that, are those kind of values across now the organisation, or does that kind of sit within the improvement space? How does those link more broadly?
Yeah, so we've got different trust values that align, but the strategy development that we did it as a team, and we also did lots of Let's Talk quality improvement sessions across the organisation. So brought lots of people together and kind of drew things out of that. But the actual values really were developed by the team. So we spent a lot of time, and again, it's me being a psychologist as well, kind of like really thinking about what improvement meant to the staff working in my team. And actually we went through a series of kind of vision setting workshops and value setting workshops, and really looked at what key values we all brought together, and kind of homed it down to the kind of top 3 or 4, and then what fit and aligned to the organisation. It was a really interesting kind of series of workshops we did with the team, and the kind of some of the key themes that came out of that was people's curiosity, their creativity, and their kind of courage to want to bring people on board and look at improvement methodology. So those were the values that we then held as a team, and those are the values that we're trying to instill really within the staff within our organisation, but also across, you know, ultimately across our system partners, as well as we kind of move and develop our work together.
Great. Thank you both. Really great insight into your own leadership as well as what you're doing locally. Can't wait to see in a year's time how you evolve things and move things on. So thank you both. And yeah, between all of that and what Penny shared, there's a lot of rich food for thought there. We have about 10 minutes and we just wanted to give you a chance to reflect on that and to incorporate what you've heard into your own learning, into your own practice. So what I'd like to do is just invite you to take a moment, cast back to different presentations, the different conversations, and maybe just to write down or to think in your mind's eye, just one thing that you'd like to take away. Is there something that, one thing that resonated, or maybe one thing that didn't resonate so much? Perhaps one thing that you're really left, that's, speaking of the word curious, you're curious about, that you might want to test out in action. So just take a moment. We'll put the principles back into the chat. It's an infographic if you want to refer to those. Yeah, just take a moment to think of that one thing, and I invite everyone to put that into the chat. This will just be a way to continue to build the group intelligence, and you can see what other people are thinking as well. And then I'll have a few minutes just to share and hear from you folks. Okay, so let's stop sharing the slide, and we'll just invite anyone who would like to either share a reflection, the one thing you might be taking away. And also this is an opportunity, if you do have any final questions for any of the speakers, feel free to ask that as well. So please use the raise hand function and we can just call on you to questions. Does anyone like to share what they're taking away? Just thinking. Is Emma, were you jumping in there? It looks like you're on mute. Still can't hear you. Oh, there you are. There you go. Oh, we still can't hear you. Maybe you could pop your question or reflection in the chat and we can pick it up there. Anyone else like to?
People are so vocal in the chat. Maybe that's the channel of choice for this session.
Yeah.
A lot of really interesting things I've seen in there. I mean, if anyone wanted to say a little bit more about what they put in, it'd be great to hear.
Yes, go ahead. Jay,
Hi,
thumbs up.
can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just wanted to chuck in a reflection really. I think it was a lot of this talk about methodology is really distracting because fundamentally at the heart of all the different QI methodologies, they're all based on an iterative principle of change, which is that we just don't know what works and we have to work it out, and we want to collaborate, we want to use evidence, we need to engage with people and experiment in order to work out what works. And I think that really is counter to a traditional mindset of how change should be done that we're used to in the NHS. We prize certainty over everything. We're such a high risk industry where we are risk averse, and we therefore seek certainty in how are we going to resolve this? We want assurance, we want clarity, we want it to be simple, and the reality is it just isn't. It's incredibly complex. It's incredibly hard to work out how to make some of these really sticky problems get resolved. And I think that's what improvers will bring, regardless of methodology. So it's almost a the distraction is to argue about which methodology. It doesn't really matter. I think at its heart is to say what we bring is a different approach to change, which is an iterative approach, which is allowing us to say, actually, we don't know, and that's okay. And we don't have to have certainty. We don't need to be able to give you exact deadlines and timelines for what will happen when, because all I see when I see people working in that framework is they just have to make it up because they don't know, but they're not given permission to work it out. And that leads to all sorts of unhelpful behaviors about, having to justify your actions, divert, blame, instead of actually getting on with fixing the problems, we're wasting our energy in these unhelpful behaviors. And I think that's really what I'm seeing as an opportunity for improvers in the system is to bring the ability to have a different mindset to how you approach some of these really complex system challenges, and to help the systems convene around developing a theory. How might we approach this? Who would we need to engage, and what experiments would we need to undertake? So the methodology doesn't matter, but really I think that's a real value that improvers bring.
Yeah,
so that was my tuppence.
Yeah, thank you for your tuppence. Really strategic. Thank you. Penny, I know you wanted to come in.
I just wanted to respond to what Jem's saying. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. One of the things that's hopefully an argument that we'll try and bring home and land in the Health Foundation publication that's coming out at the end of next week is this tension between that iterative methodology of that kind of unites a lot of improvement approaches and the kind of expectations of straight line trajectories to a certain result that is part of the prevailing culture in the health service. I suppose I'm left wondering about whether agree which methodology is a bit of a distraction, but actually being able to set out clearly your kind of theory of change, your method about how you go about doing something, I think is an important part of building the confidence of people in actually creating the space for a different sort of change. And, an awful lot of what we might take of as given in what you were just saying, Jem, and in this conversation, actually a lot of other people, including people with a lot of positional authority, will be starting from a different position. So I think used right, like judicious use of a clear methodology can be part of how you build confidence. It might be that down at the pub afterwards, you're recognizing it didn't really matter which the methodology was, but I think it does play a role, and it's part of our kind of credibility that we bring, even if we shouldn't need to justify that.
And we've got Claire. Would you like to come in?
Hi. I guess my question for you is around, I absolutely think all the work you're doing is brilliant, and I guess I'm trying to put pieces of the puzzle together in my mind. So in the chat, I mentioned that ICBs have this guidance for their system quality groups of the data-led intelligence that they should be building, looking at that kind of learning health system. And it just sort of feels like we're again still having those different conversations because they're driven by slightly different, I suppose, not aspirations, but ways of working and ways of thinking about it. And a lot of, for example, quality assurance work has often been done in a quite disjointed way from quality improvement and the more exciting, running collaboratives and sort of, talking about methodology and things. But have you seen any of those discussions sort of starting to happen about how you bring the two together in your ICBs or across your systems?
Jane, would you like to respond?
Yeah, great question, Claire. Certainly in our system, exactly as you've described, with the National Quality Board guidance and the kind of in our system, quite strong and historic focus on quality assurance, and we have started those conversations, I guess, in a short answer to your question. But I'm going to be honest, it's not easy. Trying to bring, essentially a quality management system approach across an integrated care system. It's really complicated. We've been fortunate to work with one of the key members in our system, Emma Adams, to kind of work through with us how we can start those conversations, how we can join things up. I think our approach has been one of an improvement mindset, curiosity. Let's just start talking to people and understand how different elements of those kind of assurance and learning, finding pockets where it's working. Because I think what we also recognise is that often it is happening, but because of the language, it's not being recognised as perhaps what it is. So it's definitely a focus for us going forward, but I think it's not easy. It's kind of a slow, continual conversation to try and strengthen that cycle.
Lovely, thanks, Jane. I'd love to speak to you offline.
And Penny, we have about 1 more minute before we need to wrap up. Would you like to comment?
Only if there aren't any other comments coming in, but just really interested in, Claire, your point about learning healthcare systems. And I think that is a framework for thinking about how we can, in turn join up the data analysis work with systematic learning and thinking about research. I think there's lots of different species of cat out there. You can only herd so many cats at a time, but ultimately these are all separate and related fields of activity that, unless we're joining up together, people are going to get increasingly frustrated with us, and rightly.
Okay, great. We've got just a few minutes left of this session, and I just want to say a huge thank you to Michelle and Jane and Penny for your contributions and for the great active conversations in the chat. We want to do the little poll just to see what your thoughts were about this session. So just get that there, just fill that in. Just to let you know, we'll be back for the final session. What you need to do is to go back into the main session platform, to the overall platform, to then hook into the Zoom link, which will take you to the final session of the day. So thanks again, and just let the survey run for another few minutes. But just thank everyone for your contributions. Okay, thanks everyone, and see you for the final session in just about 10 minutes.